so thank you for the invitation. It's nice to be here. Yeah, I guess the reason why you asked me and Sana to come here is the emphasis on play, or the concept of play we are going to work with next year in directing and dramaturgy programs. Why we came up with the idea of play, I think there are many reasons why we want to bring that next year to our programs. I think one of the things is, at least for me, is that I find because gaming and game structures and play structures and gamification and so on, it's a big thing in society and kind of in the broader dramaturgy we all live in, and that's why I think we need to be interested in it in dramaturgy. Also, it's kind of a thing in performances and in dramaturgy itself. Also, I think maybe the play and playfulness, also because I think what I kind of miss and sense a bit talking with students, that people are all very kind of very much think on art and what difference can art make and what kind of very heavy and serious themes we should deal with and what do I say with the work I do, which I think they are important questions, of course, but somehow I feel that sometimes in those conversations it's kind of a lose or miss the playing thing and the artsy thing in art, and like the thing like how art really works or plays and affects things. And I think that's one of the reasons to bring in the concept of play and to maybe think about the playfulness. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. So this is not a very kind of a neat and clear presentation. It's more kind of a very many loose ends on play, and it's also probably very messy. Maybe it's because it's already December, but maybe also that I find that for me, when I think of play, messiness and chaos, I think it's very important, because I think play also kind of when play comes to play, or when play comes in, it kind of needs messiness and mess and loose ends, and also I think it kind of needs boredom. So of course playing has to do with fun, but I think very many times playing is born out of boredom and not so much of fun. So this is some loose ends, and some of these things I think you've been thinking a lot of these things, and maybe more than I have. Just to say something from my point of view, I think when I think of play and what I'm now going to speak, I speak very much as a practitioner. I'm a dramaturg and performance maker, and play has been very important in my artistic work, and I think of my work very much as devising rules and logics for performance. So my kind of dramaturgical work or composing and making pieces, it's not so much about story and not so much about representation, but how I see it is very much about finding the logic or finding the rules of the play. And this is how the concept of play has become very important for me. Also, I'm doing a doctoral candidate research project on play and dramaturgy, and the research plan is called Playful or Ludic Dramaturgy, and pause, repetition and gesture as elements of a ludic or playful dramaturgy. So this is like from where or from which point of view I come to this concept. There is something about dramaturgy, kind of a current and very broad definitions, you see, and actually if you look at these definitions about dramaturgy, some of them already kind of very much remind the concept of play. Actually, if you define dramaturgy with this kinds of definitions and this openly, it already very much relates to play. And this is something you could actually argue that play is about weaving together different elements, or working on actions, or inner flow of a dynamic system, perhaps. Okay, but what is important for me in these very different definitions is to understanding dramaturgy a sort of a process and dynamic system, more than a representation or something that is delivered somehow. And for me, the playing has been an important concept also because I see it as one possible maybe line of light out of this dramatic, post-dramatic conversation which has been very much going on in contemporary theatre and in dramaturgy for past 15 years, which has been a very fruitful when it first appeared, but which I think is more of a burden actually these days, because it really doesn't reveal anything about dramaturgy to say it's dramatic or post-dramatic. And also it's not actually a dramaturgical conversation at all, even in the first place in Hans Thiesleman's book. So this is what I've been trying to work on with the concept of play to get out of this. What is juoksuhauta in English? No. Okay. Also, why I like the idea of play, that it's something that everybody has some experience about, and when I think of playing, I also think that is one area where everybody has some experience on dramaturgical thinking and dramaturgical work actually, which I find something that connects dramaturgy in performance setting, in artistic setting, and in everyday life. And also I think something in playing, both the negotiation part and the actual playing, the fictional part, are often understood as part of the play. According to some research, children, when they are asked what is play or when do they play, they see the negotiations already a part of play, so they don't make the distinctions that this is when we play. But actually the play starts already when they are negotiating, like what should we play and who is who, for example, in this kind of play, and what do we do, and organizing the setting and the physical elements. So it's this kind of fluidity between the fictional level and the negotiation about the rules, like kind of the meta level, they both come into play. And this is something that I think it's the same many times in current dramaturgies and current performance settings. Okay, and I'm also kind of thinking or looking into how much you could actually look at the current dramaturgies and also some of the dramaturgical developments in 20th century from the viewpoint of play. And I'm thinking these are very, very different groups and names I have here. Fluxus movement in United States, Derivations, Samuel Beckett's plays, especially the late and the short plays, and here some more current forced entertainment, and maybe some participatory and relational work from 2000 onwards. What could we understand current dramaturgy and contemporary dramaturgy from the viewpoint of play? Could play perhaps be one of the concepts that that could help us to understand in a more kind of a deep or interesting way some of the dramaturgies. Here then I just hop here into the classical definition of play, which you perhaps are familiar with, or it's kind of a, and then I have some kind of a play I want to go through. So nowadays we often use kind of wider understanding of what is play. It's not, you can understand play something very, very strict and something that is opposed to work, but of course nowadays it's much more understood as something that it's all over the place actually all the time. And kind of the most open definitions go like this: free movement in a more rigid structure, which of course makes almost everything a play. Play has been in Western tradition from Romanticism and onwards understood that as a thing that it's something very human, and that human is most human when he or she plays, says Schiller. Nowadays, I think there's much more emphasis on the thing that everybody plays, and play is a cross-species thing, and play could be seen like everywhere. And also this seeing play as a kind of surplus thing that comes after all the necessities are fulfilled. I think nowadays play is often understood more as an inherent and basic thing in everything. Here's a quote. Play may be considered as a particular kind of activity, distinct, say, from work, or it may be considered as fundamental element of human being that is as expressed in some way in any particular activity. Here it's human. I think one of the interesting things about some current play theories is the cross-species understanding of it. In romantic tradition, play has been understood something very good. Now it's of course also there is a lot of stress on so-called dark play, that play doesn't need to be nice or fun or useful. One of the interesting things dramaturgically about play, I think it's the relation of time and play. Very kind of on a very broad level, there are theories that emphasize on playing as a repetition, dealing with something, for example, with a difficult experience, and then you deal with it by playing. And then there are theories that put more emphasis on play as rehearsal and see like the utopian potentiality in play. And also one of the big paradoxes is in different theories of play is that play is seen something very useful, that children and learn from playing, and it's very good for us. But then again, if we very much stress on the usefulness of play, then we are on the verge of kind of losing the playfulness in play, because it doesn't need to be, and it can't. Actually, it's not always useful, and it's something that is usually done for its own sake. That's how it's understood. Ludic turn. I guess it's something that you're familiar with. It's been argued that from 50s onwards there has been such a ludic turn in Western society. Toys and free time and many these kind of things come to art, and they also come to the cultural. It's not something only children do, but they come more to the forefront in arts and in society and in culture. And then of course this much more recent development with games and gamification. And I think when it comes to dramaturgy, I think this game issue is very interesting. And maybe one of the things is that how much it is actually a very deep dramaturgical change in the way we think and perceive, and how much it's kind of a more superficial, that the deep structures stay the same. It's only a question of media or more of a surface dramaturgy. And for me, one of the like interesting issues is the relationship between play and game, and how it's actually in Finnish we use different words. It's about the same as play and game, leikki and peli in Finnish. And I think one of the interesting things is, are they different modes or degrees of the same phenomenon, or actually if they are two totally different things. And of course one of the things is that in play the rules can be negotiated and they can change and keep changing. Basically in game the rules are more rigid. And this is, I think, it's very important and interesting to think what does this mean in performance and in an artwork. If the rules can be negotiated all the time or not. And if the performers or the makers can negotiate the rules and keep negotiating them, what kind of structures would able to the audience or the participants to also negotiate with them. And then maybe this is the, yeah, maybe we can go through this and this, then leave some time for discussion. This is Roger Caillois, a French theorist, wrote in 50s the book Les Jeux et l'Homme, Man, Play and Games, and he made this four different types of play, which according to him all play could be put into these 4 different categories. And this is something very kind of old in play, but I find this actually dramaturgically quite interesting. So he devised these Latin terms he wanted to use, which were alea, agon, mimicry, and illings. Alea meaning aleatory coincidence. Agon meaning fighting and competition and these kind of things. Mimicry comes from mimesis. Mimicry, it's actually a biological term, meaning for example, insects or other animals who mimic other animals. So he wanted to use the term mimicry because he saw this mimicry as very kind of a biological and very deep instinct or threat or thing. And then it's illings, which means whirlwind. So according to Caillois, all play can be put into these 4 categories. And here are the examples he gave. One plays football, billiard, or chess, meaning this agon is the most, is the principle that is in forefront. Roulette or lottery, which means alea. One plays pirate, Nero or Hamlet, and this is mimicry. Or one produces in oneself by a rapid whirling or falling movement a state of dizziness and disorder, and this is illings. And then these can appear in different combinations, but these are kind of the four main categories. And then he also introduced a kind of continuum between paideia, meaning free play, and ludus, meaning game, which has very strict rules. And then he saw that this continuum can appear in all of these 4 categories. That there can be something that is based to agon, which can be very strict, like the rules of the chess are very strict, or there can be something that is more kind of loose and more based on a free play. One interesting things in these dramaturgically, I think, is that the dramatic theatre has been very much, of course, based on the principles of mimicry. Somebody is playing somebody else, and others are enjoying watching this. And the element of agon, if we think of dramatic structures, is very much in classical tragedy or in dramaturgy or dramaturgy of drama.
Can you repeat what agon was?
Agon is kamppailu, kilpailu,
okay.
Competition.
And alea was chance?
Chance, yeah. And one of the things I've been thinking is that actually how much, if you shift the focus and think of alea, this chance and coincidence, and illings, which haven't been so much in forefront in understanding of dramaturgy. Actually, if you look current dramaturgies or dramaturgies of the 20th century, how much actually these illings and alea are in forefront, and how much you could actually kind of get much further by thinking these in relation to dramaturgy. And I think you can think, when you think of course we have aleatory structures, very many different kind of, I think that has been one of the things, because dramatic structure work very much on fate, and actually a dramatic structure is by definition something that is built so that nothing else can't happen. And this is kind of a definition of good drama. So it's very kind of deep, dramaturgically, a deep change if you build something that is based on coincidence. Yeah, and also Illink's, if the Aristotelian ideal of dramaturgical ideal is that the play should be a convenient size. It shouldn't be too big, it shouldn't be too little, it should be perceived and understood in one time. And then I think a lot of current work can be understood as dealing with Illink's having too many or too little kind of things. You can't grasp it all in one at once, or it has too little. It deals with repetition and boredom, and in this sense creates this feeling of dizziness or disorder. Okay, maybe I say one more thing, and then please, if you have comments or questions. One of the other kind of classical play things that has been an inspiration for me is Donald Winnicott, who is an English psychoanalyst and who was very famous with very famous theories about children and development psychology, and also about play. And what I think interesting in what he says about play in relation to dramaturgy is that for him playing is something very different than fantasizing, and playing is, for Winnicott, always has to do with reality. So it's not something that happens only in your head, but it happens with real objects or things or people from the outer world. And what is special according to Winnicott in playing is that you have the dream potential and something that comes from within you, but then you have these very real things, objects or other things from reality. And this is actually what consists of play. It doesn't happen entirely inside of you, and it doesn't happen entirely out of you. And this is what I kind of find very important in dramaturgy, because for me actually dramaturgical work or dramaturgy starts when there is something you can organize and you can work with. And it can be scenes, it can be text, it can be people, it can be whatever, but it needs to have something. And for me it's kind of other things when you just imagine or plan something in your head. Yeah. Then there are some more quotes. Maybe one more thing I want to say is again even kind of an older quote or reference from Walter Benjamin, who wrote a short text on toys and play, which it was actually a review of a book, and he kind of makes a distinction between story and play, and he argues that an adult relieves his heart from its terrors and doubles happiness by turning it into a story. A child creates the entire event anew and starts again right from the beginning. Here perhaps is the deepest explanation of the two meanings of the German Wortspiele. The element of repetition is what is actually common in them. Not doing as if, but doing the same thing over and over again. The transformation of shattering experience into a habit. That is the essence of play. And this is one of the kind of what I find interesting and what I'm not kind of sure about, but this claim that story and dealing with reality and shattering experiences with a story would be kind of a one mode, or one, here it said adult, but one kind of a dramaturgical mode, and the other would be playing and repeating. And I find it, I find it interesting. Okay, so here is some of the loose ends about play. Maybe if somebody wants to comment now, or then we can have we can talk after the other presentation in this.
Yes, thank you, Kake. We have some minutes if you have some kind of immediate question or notion. Joris.
Hi, thanks for your sharing your thoughts in such a form, because it's always nice if it's not a too polished story, so you can think about. I was wondering, Are you interested in the notion of play or even the methodology of play as part of the teaching process for makers? Or are you interested in the relationship to audiences? Because to me those are very distinctly different phases in which you would dramaturgically look at play and playfulness.
Well, I think I'm interested in both, and of course they are very different things, but yeah, at some level they are different things, but if one thinks very broadly, like the concrete things you would do if you want to play with audience or involve audience in playing and in a participatory way, they are different. But somehow the idea, how to say this, actually for me the distinction doesn't lie in if it's participatory or not. Then you make different kind of different kind of things with your performance. But that's, for me, it's not maybe such a deep, that's not the kind of the deepest distinction or deepest question when it comes to this. And this is something that I've been kind of, it stems from my own artistic practice, from the things I've done, improvisational structures I've devised, and it's also something that I've been using in teaching.
No, it made me think of improvisation, and we can talk about later. I would be very interested in how you see the notion of improvisation, which is of course a structured methodology in theater for a long time, how play would sort of enhance that idea, because there seem to be very much overlapping.
They sure are overlapping. I think what I've, at least so far, I've used the concept of play exactly because it's also something that, because it's so broad and because it's something that it's also done in real life and not only in theatrical context. And that's why I kind of wanted to use, because I'm kind of interested in these connections between the real life or the everyday life and this kind of a notion or idea that everybody actually does dramaturgical work. Thank you.
Okay, some other questions? Was the one
Yes, I was kind of intrigued with the concept of illings and thinking about what could possibly be the outcome of an illings in a performance, and then I came to think about the sublime or a spectacle in this sense. I'm interested in how do you see it as a possibility in a performance, so that what kind of form could a performance which is playing around with illings, the concept, take?
Yeah, why not spectacle? But for me, spectacle is something that you can somehow grasp, or it's images, and it's something that you somehow want to consume. And maybe for me, I think there could be, of course, other answers, but maybe for me it's about this having too little or having too much, something that you really can't kind of take and grasp and perceive. As you know, I think July has been working with one of the a light designer working with the concept of illings in her work.
Tulay Shakir. I was thinking in the, when you mentioned the illings also, that and a possible example is that could you say that this kind of futurist provocations would be some kind of one kind of that kind of brand of performances of illings, thinking about that the provocation and the purposeful meaning of causing disorder in the audience, not like performing, but in order to activate something.
Yeah, you could.
Yeah.
And of course, I think this also what I find interesting in this agon, alea, illings mimicry is also to think that because when teaching, when I teach, sometimes it's, I think for me it's a big thing to get people to think dramaturgy, that it's not something that happens on stage, even if you have a stage production, but it's actually an effect that happens in the spectator, or it's something that deals with the loop. And this is something like what I find these concepts interesting, because somehow it deals with the audience and with the effect of dramaturgy.
Okay, I think time
Yeah.
is up.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kake.
Thank you.